Got a really interesting one for you today. Got a lineup of songs that were complete failures when they first came out, but fortune was with them because even though some of these tracks couldn't crack the charts to save their lives, they all became massive multi-million-dollar moneymakers, and you've heard them all. We got the story of a psychedelic rivalry that got so heated, one frontman sent his former friends from another band 4 shotgun shells with their names written on them, and a note that read, "Enjoy your success while you can." They actually had to call the police and get a restraining order. There's also a cult classic that wasn't released as a single, but thanks to an explosive movie spot, really a legendary movie spot, it's now getting licensing offers once a week, making the songwriter enough to retire. Then you've got the band whose song became the theme for one of HBO's all-time biggest shows. But their manager completely screwed them, selling it for $500. It raked in millions, but would they ever see any of it? Plus, there's the B-side nobody wanted that came out of nowhere to make $25 million. From family-friendly drug anthems to obscure punk covers that went viral 40 years later, these are the songs that prove that timing is everything. Let's do it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever smash the competition in a really competitive game of Candyland, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now and click the bell. And also make sure to grab your Vintage Years Collection shirt. We got a special going through the month. So about a year ago, I did a show on songs that amassed surprising fortunes in ways that nobody saw coming. There were tracks that never made much noise on the charts, but hit the jackpot because they were in the right place at the right time. Today, we're returning to this concept and going to bring you 7 more of these unexpected cash cows. And I'm going to call this one Failure to Fortune. And as usual, I'm going to be telling some unbelievable stories. They're going to make you the king of the conversation or the water cooler. Let's dive right in. All right, so starting things off at the number 7 spot, it's deadpan 80s new wave at its best. I Know What Boys Like by the Waitresses. This is such a fun song. I know what boys like. The song started off as something of a bar joke. It bombed commercially and then decades later became a multi-million-dollar movie licensing goldmine. Now, it all started in the late 70s at a dive bar called the Bucket Shop in Akron, Ohio. Chris Butler, a member of the local band Tin Huey, was having a rough night. He watched as the women at the bar repeatedly gave all their attention to the lawyers and white-collar patrons. And they were completely ignoring the lowly musicians. Said Butler about it, and I quote, "I got into this mindset, and it wasn't a pretty one. It was about women in a bar situation, wheeling and dealing their wares, so to speak, for the highest bidder. And I was definitely the lowest bidder in the bar. That bitter observation became the inspiration for I Know What Boys Like. Now, Butler went home and he recorded a demo. When he played it for his bandmates, they totally shot it down, thought the song was nowhere near their standards. So Butler just put it on the shelf and he forgot about it. But then he reconnected with Patty Donahue, a girl he'd known at Kent State University. He convinced her to sing on a new demo, and he brought it back to Tin Huey with an idea. At the end of their sets, they just bring Patty on stage to perform the song. They put on t-shirts that said Waitresses Unite, and then transform into a different act called the Waitresses. It was all just a gag, big joke, but it worked. The bit, it became a staple of their shows. Eventually, Chris and Patty moved to New York and turned the Waitresses into a real band. They released I Know What Boys Like as a single in 1980, but it went nowhere. The group landed a deal with Polydor, and they included the song on their 1982 debut album, Wasn't Tomorrow Wonderful? Now, they re-released it as a single, but this time it managed to chart at number 62 on the pop charts. It also went to number 23 on the rock charts. I know what guys want. I see them looking. The song also appeared in the 1982 comedy The Last American Virgin. That had a really good soundtrack, a lot of other great songs on there.
The Last American Virgin. See it or be it. Yeah!
You could call the Waitresses a one-hit wonder, except technically, I Know What Boys Like wasn't even a hit. They also had the cult classic Christmas Rapping, but that was a no-show on the charts too. But of course, everyone has referred to them as a one-hit wonder anyway. It's been in a lot of those countdowns. The band released 2 albums, and then they broke up. But jump ahead many years later, and the pop culture placements started rolling in. On this side of the year 2000, I Know What Boys Like was featured in The Simpsons and The L Word. That was in 2006. Nip Tuck, Ugly Betty, and Family Guy in 2007. I know what boys like, boys like. Lee in 2011. Gotham in 2016.
I make them want me. I like to tease them.
There was Glow in 2018, The Society in 2019, and Thanksgiving in 2023. So what the hell happened? Why did this once forgotten track emerge from obscurity? I don't know there's a clear-cut answer, but there are some factors at play, I guess. I mean, by the early 2000s, Gen X had reached positions of influence in Hollywood as directors and showrunners and music supervisors and whatnot. And many of these creators preferred underground tracks from their youth over massive hits. And they were also less expensive to license. And because I Know What Boys Like wasn't overplayed, it felt fresher and still carrying this retro cool vibe. And Patty Donahue's vocal delivery comes off as, snotty and bored and kind of teasing, which made the perfect sonic shorthand for the queen bee or the mean girl archetype. Said Butler, I was writing about the power of the no. It was about a woman having the ultimate say in a bar situation. It's funny that it's now become this anthem for popular girls in movies. Since the turn of the millennium, I Know What Boys Like is transformed from a quirky 80s one-hit wonder into a high-yield asset within the music licensing market, generating multiple millions in total publishing and master revenue. The song now commands substantial licensing fees for each placement, making it far more profitable than Chris Butler could have ever imagined. Boys like me. All right, coming in number 6 on the countdown, we have a gritty song about heroin addiction that's since become the soundtrack for family cruise vacations around the world. That's right, I'm talking about Iggy Pop's Lust for Life. When Lust for Life first dropped in 1977, it was a cult track at best. Co-written with David Bowie during their legendary Berlin period, the song featured a thunderous Motown-inspired drum beat and lyrics about a junkie dealer named Johnny Yen and the liquor and drugs of the Berlin underworld. I mean, not exactly top 40 material or, the song that every kid was going to buy. The song languished in obscurity for nearly 2 decades, known only to serious Iggy Pop fans. But in 96, everything changed. Director Danny Boyle used Lust for Life for the opening sequence of Trainspotting, and it was absolutely perfect. Cinema magic for sure. As Ewan McGregor's character Mark Renton sprints through the streets to escape the police, that frantic drum beat mirrors the kinetic energy of the chase. And the brilliant irony? An upbeat song titled Lust for Life paired with Renton's cynical choose life monologue and the brutal reality of heroin addiction.
Brace yourselves. Choose your future. Choose life.
The film effectively resurrected Iggy Pop's career right then and there. Lust for Life was re-released as a single later that year, and it peaked at number 26 on the UK singles chart. More importantly, the Trainspotting soundtrack went on to sell over 4 million copies worldwide, and suddenly, this song wasn't a cult classic anymore.
No reasons. Who needs reasons when you've got heroin?
And then in 2001, things got weirdly interesting. Royal Caribbean launched their Get Out There campaign, and they wanted Iggy's song to be the centerpiece of that. I mean, to transform a heroin-soaked anthem into a corporate jingle, not an easy thing to do. The cruise line heavily sanitized the track, though. They stripped away any references to drugs, focusing almost exclusively on the pounding drum beat and that exuberant chorus. And the result? Slow-motion shots of families having fun and exotic adventures.
Between the Mayan ruins.
Despite the dark irony, the campaign was a massive success. It actually ran through the mid-2000s and rebranded Royal Caribbean as a premier cruise line for younger travelers. For nearly a decade, many people recognized Lust for Life as that cruise song rather than a punk rock classic.
Way more than a cruise. See for yourself at royalcaribbean.com and get out there.
But that wasn't all. The campaign signaled that Iggy was open for business, and the licensing deals kept rolling in. The song also attracted the attention of Nike and even Pampers. And Iggy himself appeared in a Swift cover car insurance campaign, although that famously backfired when the Advertising Standards Authority banned it.
Anymore when I could just ride. I suggest you do the same. Get a life. Get Swift covered.
Turns out Swift cover refuses to insure professional musicians, so it was a little misleading. But between sync licensing fees from Royal Caribbean and Company and Trainspotting, the soundtrack sales, Lust for Life has generated an estimated 15 to 16 million in revenue. However, because Iggy and Bowie split everything 50-50, you can split the numbers right down the middle there for Iggy. So for a song that was a commercial failure in 1977 and really an anthem for heroin, became an extremely lucrative asset. right, next up at number 5, it's a song from a band that's not from Alabama and actually has more than 3 band members, but they go by the name Alabama 3. The song is Woke Up This Morning, formed by Rob Spragg and Jack Black. The band is actually a collective from South London with rotating members. And despite being from England, they had this weird affinity for American country music, which they sometimes mashed up with house music. Their first album dropped in '97, titled Exile in Cold Harbor Lane. Some music critics absolutely loved it, but it left zero impression on the charts. That fusion of Americana and electronic beats was too far out there for a lot of listeners. Among the tracks was one called Woke Up This Morning, a song that would remain completely obscure for the next couple of years. With the refrain, Woke Up This Morning, got myself a GUN. Can't say it on here, the video will get taken down. Sounds like a straight up, kind of like a gangster anthem.
Got yourself a gun. Mama always said you'd be.
But it was actually inspired by a domestic abuse survivor who took the law into her own hands. Spragg wrote this song about Sarah Thornton from Warwickshire, England. This was in 1989 after enduring years of abuse and threats against her and her young daughter. Thornton unalived her husband, Malcolm, this is while he was resting on the sofa, and she did it with a sharp weapon. Of course, can't go into big details here on YouTube. She was convicted of this crime in 1990. Women's advocacy groups rallied around her case, though, arguing she was desperate to protect herself. Eventually, she was granted a retrial, and this time the jury found her guilty of manslaughter instead of the higher crime that I can't actually say on here. How dumb is that? She was freed in 1996. Said Spragg about it, she just had enough. So she woke up one morning and decided to go get herself a knife. Now that would have been the lyric, but it didn't quite sound right, so we changed it to GUN. Lucky for the band that they did, because in 1998, David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, was driving down the New Jersey Turnpike, and it just so happened that Woke Up This Morning came on the radio. He was convinced he was listening to a group of black rappers from Brooklyn, and he was shocked to find out they were actually Welshmen and Scotsmen from London.
Woke up this morning, got yourself a gun.
Now, Chase originally wanted to use a different song to open every single episode, but of course HBO insisted on one theme for branding consistency. So Woke Up This Morning became the one and only. However, by the time The Sopranos debuted, Alabama 3 had already been dropped from their American label Geffen. And because they had an inexperienced manager, they signed away the initial rights for a flat fee of just $500. $500! Said Spragg, we didn't know what it was. All we'd heard was that HBO was a small cable channel in New York. Again, these guys are from London. They hadn't even heard of HBO at that point. He said no one thought much of it, so it was signed off quite cheaply and there was no recognition of us on the credits. And then about 6 months after The Sopranos premiered, the band started getting calls from people in America saying, you know, there are massive billboards everywhere with James Gandolfini on them. They couldn't believe it. Eventually, Alabama renegotiated a new contract from a position of disadvantage. But even so, it's estimated that song has generated between $3 to $6 million in royalties over the years, and even more now that's in syndication. However, because the track contains elements of Howlin' Wolves Tell Me, a sample from Standing at the Burying Ground by Mississippi Fred McDowell, and a sample from Mannish Boy by Muddy Waters, nearly half of that sum goes to the musicians that they sampled.
Everything gonna be all right this morning. Standing at one burying ground.
What's left over is split between the Alabama 3 band members, which 8 are listed on the song's album, so let's just say the numbers could have been a whole lot bigger in a different circumstance. All right, so heading in the number 4 spot, it's the story of how a cell phone commercial saved a band's career and ratcheted up one of the most bizarre rivalries in rock history. You got to check this out. The band is the Dandy Warhols, and the song at the center of this story is Bohemian Like You. The Dandy Warhols are psychedelic indie rockers out of Portland, Oregon. Great band, I love them. Led by frontman Courtney Taylor, they dropped their debut Dandy's Rule OK in 1995. In all, they've released 12 albums. Their most recent Rockmaker came out in 2024. They're not exactly commercial juggernauts. Their highest charting LP on the Billboard 200 came in at number 88, and they've never had a single break into the Hot 100. But the Dandy Warhols have been able to stick around thanks to their single Bohemian Like You. More on that in just a second. But first, I got to point out that the fate of this band is inextricably tied to another psychedelic indie outfit, the Brian Jonestown Massacre, who I'll refer to as BGM for short as we go on. Fronted by the unhinged musical genius Anton Newcomb, they formed in San Francisco in the early 90s and were both an inspiration and a bit of a foil to the Dandy Warhols. Okay, so the two groups were close friends and peers in the underground scene. However, when the Dandies landed a major label deal with Capitol, Anton began accusing them of selling out. So BGM's leader was fiercely independent and increasingly volatile thanks to a spiraling heroin addiction. A lot of stuff about heroin in here. The two bands became the ultimate indie rock frenemies, trading barbs and songs throughout their careers. Courtney Taylor wrote Not If You Were the Last Junkie on Earth about Anton, and as a rebuttal, Anton wrote Not If You Were the Last Dandy on Earth. Anton also gave the Dandies one of the most passive-aggressive gifts ever. Anton dropped off a package for the band whose contents included 4 individually wrapped shotgun shells with each of the Dandy band members' names on them. There was also the card that read, "Please enjoy your success while you can." Anton called it performance art, according to him. The Dandies, they called the cops. They had a restraining order issued against Anton. The whole saga was captured in the 2004 documentary Dig.
He's stalking us now. I will not have him anywhere near me again.
I'll still buy their albums.
Now, fast forward to the year 2000, the Dandy Warhols released their highest charting single, Bohemian Like You. And by highest charting single, I mean that it was all but a complete bust. The song failed to break into the mainstream at all and fared better on the modern rock tracks chart and alternative airplay charts. But it wasn't catching fire like they'd hoped or like their label had promised it would. The band toured relentlessly to revive it, but it just wasn't working, and the Dandies were about to be dropped by their label. But then came the ultimate Hail Mary. The ad agency WCRS chose Bohemian Like You as the backing track for the British telecommunication company Vodafone's massive marketing campaign. And suddenly, the song had a new life in Europe. The exposure was so huge. Bohemian Like You was re-released in October of 2001 and it jumped to number 5 on the UK singles chart. How about that? The commercial saved the song and the band's career. And then the money started rolling in. And according to Dandy guitarist Peter Holmstrom, the tune paid for their independence. The band then built their own studio in Portland, the Auditorium, ODD Auditorium. And from there, the song would appear in more than a dozen films and TV shows. But not everyone was happy about their success. Anton Newcomb was furious that his former friends had officially sold out. But Dandy drummer Brent DeBoer offered this as a rebuttal, saying, "As far as I'm concerned, Vodafone saved rock and roll. I mean, the most guitar-oriented music on British TV at that time was Robbie Williams of Take That." Oh, man. The Dandies, Dandy Warhols, they're so underrated. I love their song on Veronica Mars. You probably heard it, We Used to Be Friends. One of the most badass songs of the last few decades.
A long time ago, we used to be friends, but
All right, coming in at number 3, we have another Netflix miracle story. Just like Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, but this one might be even cooler. Always wanted to cover this band on this show. This one's a 40-plus-year-old underground punk song that became a global viral sensation literally overnight, all because of a quirky dance scene. It's Goo Goo Muck by the Cramps.
I turned into a teenage Goo Goo Muck.
All right, to set things up, the Cramps formed in Ohio back in 1976. The band featured lead singer Lux Interior, guitarist Poison Ivy, guitarist Brian Gregory, and his sister Pam Balam on drums. They soon moved to New York City and dove headfirst into the emergent punk scene at CBGB's, rubbing shoulders with the Ramones, Patti Smith, Television, Blondie, and Talking Heads. The Cramps had a uniquely wild sound, though. Garage rock meets rockabilly with camp lyrics full of sexual innuendos and B-movie references. Now, after a couple of lineup changes with Miriam Lina, briefly replacing Pam before Nick Knox became the permanent drummer, the band started recording. Their earlier work was cut at the legendary Sun Records studio with producer Alex Chilton. The result was a frantic blend of rockabilly, 60s garage band energy, and a ghoulish love of horror movies. In 1981, the Cramps released their second album, Psychedelic Jungle. This record was split between original compositions and covers of rock singles from the 50s and 60s. Now, among those covers was Goo Goo Muck, originally written and recorded by Ronnie Cook and the Gay Lads back in 1962.
I turn into a teenage goo-goo muck.
Now, despite their momentum being interrupted by a brutal legal battle with YRS Records in the early 80s, the Cramps kept their horror trash style intact throughout their career. They cycled through several replacements over the years. However, chart success completely eluded them. The Cramps really only ever hit the charts one time with Bikini Girls with Machine Guns. That reached number 10 on the alternative rock chart in 1990. But they had 0 hits on the Hot 100, of course. Even still, the band had one of the most recognizable logos and t-shirts in pop culture history, and of course a huge cult following. Now, the band stayed active across 8 studio albums before dissolving after Lux Interior's death in 2009.
When I show up, the goo-goo muck.
To flash forward to November 2022, Netflix dropped the series Wednesday starring Jenna Ortega as the iconic Addams Family character. So in episode 4, there's a school dance scene where Wednesday performs this deadpan spooky dance to the Cramps version of Goo Goo Muck.
I turn into a teenage goo-goo muck.
Ortega choreographed the moves herself, apparently. She drew inspiration from Susie Sue and Bob Fosse, apparently. And the scene was instantly iconic. The Wednesday dance became a global TikTok challenge overnight. Millions of users uploaded their own versions of Wednesday's moves. Interestingly enough, Lady Gaga's Bloody Mary also went viral, as many Gen Zers wished that Wednesday's creators would have used Gaga's track instead. But while the Bloody Mary trend dominated TikTok, industry analysts noted this still drove massive traffic back to the Cramps' original version. In a single week, the track generated almost $12,000 for the Capitol Records master recording and about $2,500 in publishing royalties. Also, Spotify's streams increased by 9,500%. Today, the formerly all but unknown track now sits at over 151 million streams on the platform. Conservative estimates put the total new revenue generated by the Wednesday effect at somewhere between $2 and $3 million. Pretty penny for a psychobilly cover that had been sitting in obscurity for 4 decades.
The goo-goo muck.
All right, coming in at the bridesmaid position, number 2, I've got Pixies with Where Is My Mind?
Where is my mind? Where is my mind?
Yeah, even though Where's My Mind never charted on the Hot 100, it never cracked the alternative rock charts, it was never released as a single during the band's original run, it somehow became Pixies frontman Black Francis' never-ending retirement plan. And when you hear how this thing took off, you're going to understand why. So the origins of Where Is My Mind go back to Black Francis' high school days. I guess he was on the trip to the Bahamas, and he was swimming in crystal clear water when this small fish, maybe like 4 inches long, and totally harmless, started aggressively following him around. It just kept poking at him. He was completely freaked out. Francis was like, I got to get away from this crazy fish. Weird inspiration, right? Well, fast forward to 1987, and Francis was in his bedroom working on the song, playing what he had so far. His wife at the time was in the bathroom doing her makeup when she stuck her head out and said, man, that's a good one. Finish that one. Here's the thing, though. According to Black Francis, she had never responded positively to anything he'd ever written before. Ever. So right then, Francis knew he had something really special. Now, the Pixies recorded Where's My Mind in 1987 with legendary producer Steve Albini. It landed on their 1988 album Surfer Rosa. The whole recording process, it was pretty loose. According to Francis, they had a carefree attitude, like, here's this idea that's completely unrealized, and it goes like this. It wasn't that they didn't care. They were just on fire at the time. And Albini's approach was more spontaneous than calculated. You know, just let's try that. But somehow his style meshed perfectly with the band's raw energy. They didn't really know what they were doing, but man, they did it well. Musically, there's something about that major to minor chord shift that just resonates. Combine that with the universal sentiment of the title, and you definitely have lightning in a bottle. I mean, that loud, quiet dynamic is what they're famous for, right? It's amazing. But Where's My Mind? It was never meant to be more than a badass album track. Or maybe not. In 1999, more than a decade after the song was recorded, it was given legendary placement in the Edward Norton Brad Pitt punch-to-face flick, Fight Club.
Everything's gonna be fine.
Director David Fincher played Where's My Mind over the movie's final moments, and it became one of the most effective needle drops in film history. As Edward Norton and Helena Bonham Carter stand hand in hand watching skyscrapers crumble in slow motion, Black Francis's sharp stop command syncs perfectly with the first explosion. Kim Deal's haunting backing vocals float over the destruction. It was absolutely perfect. Now, for a lot of viewers, this was their introduction to the Pixies. Before Fight Club, they were a cult indie band. But with the movie, Where's My Mind became a cultural phenomenon and one of the most licensed songs in alternative rock history. Said Francis, and I quote, "Some people credit Fight Club for bringing the song to a larger audience. It was a great scene, so I suppose there's some truth there. It's the song that pays my mortgage, the gift that keeps on giving. I get offers once a week for yet another advertisement, a movie, or a TV show to use it. I say yes to all of them. Since then, the track has racked up appearances everywhere. I mean, Veronica Mars, Cold Case, How I Met Your Mother, Westworld, so many others. It's a long list and an ever-growing fortune."
This is the new world.
So for a truly honorable mention, I gotta go with singer-songwriter Nick Drake. Just a legend. Now, Nick Drake's journey started in 1969 with 5 Leaves Left, and that was followed by Brighter Later in 1971. Of course, both flopped. Nick was devastated, and severe depression followed. Now, late in 71, he recorded his final album, Pink Moon. He did it alone in just 2 days. The stark, desolate result was hauntingly beautiful, but again, it went nowhere. November 25th, 1974, he was found dead from an overdose of prescribed medication. He was only 26, and he left the world virtually unknown. However, 25 years later, a car commercial put him in the spotlight. In 1999, Volkswagen used his song Pink Moon in a commercial featuring young people driving under the stars. Nick Drake sold more albums that month than in the previous 30 years combined. Today, he's recognized as a hugely influential artist, of course, but he never experienced the recognition he deserved when he was alive. In death, he has gotten the acclaim that he truly deserves. All right, we're here. The #1 spot, and it's the B-side that just would not quit. And even if you've heard this song, you haven't heard the story. Tainted Love. It's a crazy one.
Tainted love. Tainted love.
Tainted Love was written in 1964 by Ed Cobb, who was formerly of the 1950s pop quartet The Four Preps. Shortly after writing it, Cobb produced the original recording with Gloria Jones behind the mic in '64. Jones's 1964 Tainted Love failed to chart twice, though. Yet through multiple eras of resurgence, it would become one of the most profitable songs of the last 60 years. Tainted Love makes more copyright cash than almost any other song from its era. That said, this one started out as a complete bust. Gloria Jones's original version was released as the B-side of her single My Bad Boy's Coming Home. It should have been the A-side. Now, both songs didn't matter, went nowhere.
His way, my bad boy's coming home. Run away, I've got to get away.
Later in '73, a DJ named Richard Searling found a copy of it in a bargain bin in Philadelphia. He started playing it in the sets at Vava's, a popular club in Bolton, England. There it became a nightclub standard during England's Northern Soul boom, and it became so popular with that crowd that Gloria Jones was dubbed the Northern Queen of Soul. Hoping to ride the wave, Jones recorded a new version of Tainted Love in 1976. It was produced by her boyfriend Mark Bolan of T-Rex. Once again, though, it completely flopped. It was sometime during this era that Soft Cell's future lead singer Mark Allman heard the song, though. Soft Cell formed in 1980 in Leeds, England. This electro-pop duo also featured Dave Ball on synthesizers. The late Dave Ball, we just lost him. Mark Allman expressed interest in recording a cover version of Tainted Love, but the band's producer Mike Thorne wasn't into Jones's version. He thought it sounded too frantic. So they slowed down the tempo and recorded it in a key better for Allman's voice. Soft Cell's Tainted Love became their debut single off their 1981 album Nonstop Erotic Cabaret. Of course, it blew up big time. Tainted Love topped the UK charts and it became the best-selling British single of the year. Here in America, it went to number 8 on the Hot 100. In fact, Soft Cell's version set a Guinness World Record at the time for the longest consecutive stay on the Hot 100, 43 straight weeks. But Tainted Love's popularity, it didn't end there. Over the years, Ed Cobb's song, it would find new life in countless iterations. In 1991, a re-recorded Soft Cell version titled Tainted Love 91 went top 5 in the UK. And throughout the 90s, it would score placements in Coneheads, Sleepers, and Private Parts.
It's a song.
Big hit on Earth.
In 2001, it became a hit for Marilyn Manson on the Not Another Teen movie soundtrack. In the 2000s, it was featured on Friends, Doctor Who, 13 Going on 30, and Little Black Book.
Refreshments will now be served.
And in 2006, Rihanna sampled the synth line from Soft Cell's arrangement for her song SOS. By the 2010s, it was everywhere. Californication, Just Go With It, Dancing with the Stars, La La Land, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. To date, Tainted Love has made it in over 100 movies and shows. Add to that Eminem and Levi's ads and TikTok trends, and Ed Cobb and his estate has raked in almost $25 million in royalties.
Tainted love, oh, tainted love.
Not bad for a B-side that bombed 60 years before. Leave us a comment about these songs. Man, I love these stories. They're just these great stories about these songs that you never knew that just had this explosion into pop culture again. Let's talk about your memories. Let's talk about our memories of these songs below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.